All right, good evening and welcome to America in Danger. I'm Robert Crescione.
I'm John Gatsis.
Welcome to the show tonight. There is a ton to talk about, and we're in the 86th week of the great globalist, I guess the insurrection of the liberal world order, maybe now they're going by.
That's the new phrase of the day, or at least the new recycled phrase of the day. But yeah it is.
It's the same old group, but
right.
They just kind of remodel themselves, repackage themselves, like products do.
A little more out in the open than they have been historically.
A good bit, a good bit, especially with Klaus Schwab, who says, in the future you will own nothing.
And he goes so far as to say,
you'll be happy.
That's right. He's quite confident in his predictions there, apparently. And what it is they propose to do is going to make everybody happy.
It is, and I'm assuming there will be a lot of pharmaceuticals involved in that, to ensure that steady level of happiness there.
Anybody who's ever any science fiction fan should go back and watch George Lucas's first film, THX 1138. It's very much that sort of drugged utopian society that. I don't know. Maybe we're headed in that direction.
Well, I'll tell you, that's what they're pushing.
It is.
They've got children as young as 3-4 years old on medications.
Right, especially the males.
Yeah, mood-altering medications, and. It's just it's a common occurrence today that everyone is on meds.
That and these things.
Yeah.
Have a very firm. Anywhere you go, it's amazing.
It is.
Everybody's got one of these things in their hands, and so it's
typically looking at it.
Right. It's a double-edged sword.
I find myself doing it.
Oh, I'm very much plugged in. I operate all my business activities through it and through the screen, but it's a double-edged sword.
It is.
It's an immense tool for social control. And that's one of my recurrent themes. I think these globalists and these Marxist types, I think they believe that, we finally reached a level of technological capability to implement our grand vision. And this time it'll work. I really think that's kind of how some of them think.
I agree.
That's how arrogant and foolish they are.
Yes, they think they've got the technological means to take over the world.
That's right.
Well, things fall apart mighty quickly sometimes, as we've seen with the whole Twitter thing. And, Twitter, they're intent on making Musk buy them now.
Right. All right.
And it's like, well, gentlemen, you did not fulfill your obligations.
I'm assuming there, and I'm not the most sophisticated when it comes to all these business transactions and these mergers, but I think what's going on is that he just wants to get a better price.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He wants a better price, and he wants to reveal the amount of embellishment. I'll be generous. Embellishment. That Twitter does on their accounts.
Right, and they claim, they almost act like they don't even know because of their privacy policies. We don't even know, and what it is, of course, Musk's main complaint is that you can't provide me actual verified user information. How many users do you really have? Well, that's because so many of the users are fake.
Right.
So-called bots, robots or bots.
Robots, yeah. Bots.
And just fake accounts and they act like, we don't really know ourselves. Well, I think that's complete baloney. I think they most certainly do. But the number of actual subscribers goes directly to the value of Twitter and the tender he's made.
Yes, it
but
does.
I think he's just shaking the tree, and we'll see. I don't trust any of these people.
I don't trust any of them either.
So I never know what to expect. But I've been enjoying his rattling the cage of the wokerati lately.
It's been interesting, to say the least. Amusing at times.
Amusing at times.
The SEC should be stepping in at this point because if Twitter is overinflating the number of accounts and users, they're selling advertising based on that.
That's correct.
So if they're hiding the fact that a large portion of their users are really bots,
it's fraud.
It's fraud, and the SEC should be stepping in on that. But where's the SEC?
Well, hold your breath.
They're probably working out a deal with the January 6th Clown Commission to provide some phony materials there.
Well, they're probably going after Truth Social,
Yeah, probably. Probably so. Well, the 2020 election, which we were assured was the most secure in history by every nitwit on CNN.
Right, which is nonsense.
Total nonsense. And everyone, including Bob Barr, most of the Republicans, all of the Democrats have said, oh, there's absolutely no evidence of voter fraud.
Right.
Well, I beg to differ with them. There is quite a bit of evidence of voter fraud.
There is.
Now, they talk about, oh, we've done recounts and it showed everything was fine. Well, so what?
Well, that's the subtlety. I mean, if you're going to redefine something and then say, well, there's no evidence that what you're saying is true because we've redefined things to fit the current way that the way that we did things, the way that we changed things. They changed the rules for voting illegally in many of these states, and they used mail-in voting in a lot of ways. I mean, the fraud wasn't automatically, although I think there was plenty of it, the fraud wasn't automatically people filling out fraudulent ballots and depositing them or any of that. That was the way that they suppressed certain key stories, like the Hunter Biden laptop story. But more importantly, it was the way they used they relaxed chain of custody rules, and they allowed these mail-in drop boxes. That was the fraud. That was the manipulation that was bigger than any other. Okay, and the use of large amounts of private money to go in and recruit poll workers and other people who are like-minded to sort of shift this thing a certain way. So in my opinion, the election was highly manipulated, and I think and anybody watching it that night knew something was afoot when they started stopping the counts and doing all these things that anybody from certain parts of the world will tell you, we recognize that signature behavior. That's how they do it in Mexico and all the other
Central America, South
banana
America,
republics. That's right, and Eastern European countries historically.
Well, speaking of stopping the vote, John Lott has done a lot of research on this. John Lott Jr. And, I've got an article by John Lott, and he says 52% of Americans think there was voter fraud in the 2020 election. He said 34% of Democrats think there was voter fraud, and 38% of those who somewhat support Biden think there was voter fraud. That's a lot of people thinking there's voter fraud. Yeah. Now, he goes on to say his new research, which is forthcoming in a peer-reviewed economics journal, so it's not just some, website conspiracy blog.
Right, and John Lott's a very credible statistician. He's done a lot of work in the area of firearms and firearms law and so forth,
He says that he finds around 255,000 excess votes, possibly as many as 368 for Joe Biden in 6 swing states where Donald Trump lodged accusations of fault. Biden only carried these states by a total of 313,253 votes. Excluding Michigan, the gap was even smaller. It was 159,000. Now, we know Sidney Powell came up and she played a game with the American people, claiming that she had all this evidence of voter fraud. Well, she was going
to release the
Kraken. Well, she had none. And that damaged the thing from the get-go.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on there. Really difficult to discern what was happening there.
But what's interesting is she completely discredited any accusations of voter fraud. But we have Adam Schiff, Charles Schumer, Jerry Nadler, and a host of others who swore for 4 years that they saw the evidence.
Right.
And when it was finally revealed,
on the Russia collusion
with Trump, there was no evidence.
Right.
And yet it didn't discredit them. They just kept on.
That's correct.
The media didn't miss a beat on that.
Well, the media, until one recognizes that the media is 100% part and parcel of the Democratic National Committee, and to a larger extent just the establishment, the Washington establishment, they've long dispensed with any pretense of being objective journalists. And the polls and the viewership reflect that. I mean, really, I think they've lost most of their credibility. They've spent whatever credibility and capital they had over the course of the last 4 to 6 years. It's gone. I mean, it's gone. I mean, even Fox News is hard to really trust on many things. I never did too much anyway, but especially now after the way they behaved over certain things in connection with the election. But I just think these people have demonstrated that they're so partisan, and they get their talking points obviously directly from operatives within the White House. I mean, there's evidence of that. Just watch these broadcasts and piece them together. They're all using the exact same phraseology and the same catchphrases. I mean, that's not a coincidence.
No, it's not a coincidence. And we know that the White House has worked with, the Teachers Union?
That's right.
To draft a complaint about terrorist parents. So, yeah, we know that they're all in bed together. If you're familiar with 1984, the book, or the movie.
Yeah.
You know, the media is the outer party.
That's correct.
That's Orwell's outer party. They are not the the insiders.
That's right.
They're the outer party that do the bidding of the party.
Well, I thought this tidbit from John Lott's from this article by Lott was, I'm always fascinated by things that are beneath the surface, but when you tease them out of the numbers, they really reveal patterns. And this I thought was interesting. He says, artificially large voter turnouts can also be a sign of voter fraud or vote fraud. This fraud could come in the form of filling out absentee ballots for people who didn't vote, voting by ineligible people, or bribing people for their votes. Republican-leaning swing state counties had higher turnouts relative to the 2016 election. Democratic-leaning counties had lower turnouts, and this, I think, for emphasis, I would add, except for the Democratic counties with alleged voter fraud, which had very high turnouts.
Interesting.
Right. To me, that stands out as a very, very revealing pattern. Essentially, you know, the Democrat vote was somewhat suppressed that year. They weren't, you know, there wasn't this groundswell of opposition to Trump. Okay. In the key areas where they needed to swing it in these counties in certain key swing states, suddenly there's this large voter turnout, more than expected and than one statistically would expect in those particular counties. And those happen to be the counties that the Trump team were looking at, saying, yeah, something's not right here. There's fraud here.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's because there was fraud there.
I agree. Now, I put together a little video, and it's 3 trailers for videos that are coming out, and one of them has to do with some of this research that John Lott has done, and there's another one that one of the hosts from Fox News has done, but they all 3 have absolutely definitive evidence of voter fraud.
Right.
Now, is it proof sufficient to go to court on? I don't know, but you know what? It's evidence, and for our government, for our Justice Department to be chasing parents,
Right.
treating parents as terrorists, to be arresting old men at 5 o'clock in the morning with CNN televising it.
That's right.
I mean, really?
Well, I'm confident in making this statement, okay? Whether any one particular aspect or element of voter deception swung the election, that's hard to say. But I can tell you that the aggregate effort that developed from all the different prongs of attack that were brought to bear under any set of normal circumstances with a typical American election, Donald Trump would have won in a landslide.
Yes, he would have.
But you had draconian COVID policies that I think were largely brought to bear for that purpose. You had social media completely doing blackouts, you know, in collaboration with one another on key stories, especially the New York Post story about the Hunter Biden laptop, which we now know is so true that it probably reveals that our president is compromised by the communist Chinese. Okay, and still nobody's really doing much about it. Okay. The influence of the Zuckerbucks, the dollars that Facebook put in, all of these things in aggregate stole that election.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Time Magazine ran an article shortly after the election basically bragging about the degree to which these elements were able to collaborate and influence, you know, the outcome in a way that most people would judge as being grossly unfair and dishonest.
Yeah, corrupt.
So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah.
Was it voting machines and algorithms stealing? I don't know. I mean, I can't be definitive about that, although I'm not too confident in the voting machines either.
Right. Well, it's a lot of things. It's like anything.
That's right.
There's more than one aspect of it.
But there was a coordinated effort and
Absolutely,
kind of a hive mind in play to move things and to move the ball. But I think they thought I think they didn't believe they were going to have to move the ball as hard as they did, and that's where it became obvious. They had to do more than they thought they were going to have to do, and it started to be obvious, just like it is in the aforementioned banana republics.
Yeah. Take a look at this video. Lee, if you'll cue that video up for us. Take a look at this video and watch there are 3 aspects. You know, some of the things we're talking about here. 3 aspects in these is 3 separate segments in this video. Take a look at them and, you know, think about it. Decide for yourself. So we'll be back to talk about it right after this.
criminal Congressional investigations into Mesa County Clerk Tina Peters' alleged voting machine security breaches continues.
If I asked you this question before the 2020 election, are these voting machines secure?
I would have said yes.
And after the election,
I would have said yes.
what changed?
Tina Peters admits she brought in a consultant to make a forensic copy of the Dominion voting system in Mesa County.
I continue to think that our voting machines are too vulnerable.
Voting machines in Georgia and Texas switch votes from one candidate to another.
Virtually every machine was broken into.
Ballot recording machines.
Voting machines.
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 Voting machines.
Voting machines.
Machines.
Machine.
Machines.
Machine.
Machines, which are vulnerable to being hacked.
There is no serious person out there who would suggest somehow that you could even rig America's elections.
We've seen no evidence that any of our voting systems have been tampered with.
The November 3rd election was the most secure.
It was the most secure.
Most secure election in American history, period.
The process is very secretive.
These machines are built by private companies, which we don't have a right to know what goes on inside those.
What did you see during the software update?
We've uncovered something that they're afraid of.
We didn't consider the machines.
The information found there is the Rosetta Stone.
They made a mistake and left the evidence in the machine.
And you can hide it as well.
It's only what the programmer tells to say.
It's literally like the difference between going from pickpocketing to credit card fraud.
These people are being selected, not elected.
It's about who gets to count the vote.
They break down my door, terrorize my family.
FBI, federal search warrant.
What do you remember?
Just my mom being handcuffed by the chief of police.
This is not what we do in America.
You could make it all go away, though. You just keep your mouth shut. You could have your life back.
Can't unsee what I've seen.
So we're going to show you a visual, a pattern of life that someone can see and look at rather than just a whole spreadsheet of numbers, being able to look at it in this manner. What you see here on the screen is a single person on a single day in Atlanta, Georgia. They went to 28 drop boxes in 5 organizations in one day.
What are the orange dots?
Those are drop boxes.
And what is the blue tracks?
That is a smoothed out pattern of life so that we could take the sort of the movement of the individual cell phone signals, marry them together into something that's visual so that you can see movement on the individual. To get to some of these drop boxes, you had to be intentional. You had to get off the highway, you had to go on surface streets, you had to turn in somewhere in order to get to those drop boxes.
And the circles, I take it, reflect the nonprofit centers. Are that the places where the ballots originate?
The stash houses, where the ballots are collected and handed to the mules to take to the drop boxes.
All right, Arizona, Georgia, Virginia, Pennsylvania. You know, the numbers just don't work like that.
Yeah, no, they don't.
I'm sorry, they just don't work like that. No election in history has had numbers anywhere close to that.
And the whole idea that everything was going swimmingly for Trump, and then they stop the vote, and then they come back and they start dumping these ballots at 3 and 4 in the morning, and then afterwards every dumb comes in with exactly that same ratio. Mm-hmm. Statistically not possible.
No. And if you notice in the first segment, the talking about the voting machines. Mm-hmm. Well, the voting machines are programmed.
Right.
And, they found evidence of programming that actually switched ballots to maintain a ratio.
Right. I've always been uncomfortable with the voting machine situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
First of all, why would they even have that ability?
Yeah, I don't know.
There's absolutely no justification for that. Really, voting day should be voting day. Simple paper ballot. Maybe some automation to help count and process the counting. But all that complex algorithmic, network capable voting machine stuff. Yeah, that just smells bad.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. Something else that smells bad is what Biden's doing with the oil and gas. And we got to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Uncle Joe, they're selling some of our strategic reserve oil to the Chinese.
Yeah, I think it's a bit on the treasonous side myself.
I absolutely do. So stay tuned. We'll be right back for more America in Danger. All right, we are back, and we had a caller during the break there.
Yep.
We appreciate the call.
Absolutely.
It's always good to speak to a fellow hardworking American.
That's right.
Who believes that the core values in this country have not rotted away.
Right, who clearly just is bringing common sense to bear on his judgment of these issues. That was evident from the discussion, and so that's just gratifying. It gives me some hope that
it does.
Everybody's not a green-haired, tatted up nitwit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Biden promised when he came out of his hole during the campaign that he would get rid of fossil fuels.
Right. I mean, he explicitly. He got in people's faces. I promise you this, and young people and all. And
I saw a video clip today. He looking right into a young girl's face and said, "I promise you, look in my eyes. I promise you, I'm going to get rid of fossil fuels."
Right.
Well, first of all, the whole fossil fuel thing. I read a little thing about it today, and it's interesting how the term fossil fuel came about.
Yeah, it's dubious at best.
It is, and it's there's some intentionality there to make it seem like it's a finite resource, and then what have you. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Bottom line is, day one, Joe Biden goes in office, he started signing executive orders imposing restrictions on oil and gas.
That's right.
On our energy policy.
Right.
And not just oil and gas now. This was on the generation of power, the transfer of power, and all of these things dealing with energy. We're talking about energy now. That's a big picture.
Right.
That's coal, gas, oil.
That's right.
Nuclear, wind, solar, everything.
87% of which is generated by these legacy, traditional, what they call fossil fuels, oil, gas, hydrocarbon.
Yeah, hydrocarbons. That's right. That's right. Now, he has put over 100 restrictions on there and continues to add to that number. He just signed an executive order preventing exploration in the Atlantic and the Pacific now.
It's incomprehensible, really.
It's incomprehensible. And to release reserves from the strategic reserve as a means of bringing down the price.
Right.
It's ludicrous, number one.
It's a drop in the bucket for daily consumption.
It's a drop in the bucket. But what's really a kicker in this is that he has allowed the sale of strategic reserve oil to China.
Yeah, that
and India.
Unbelievable.
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 It is absolutely unbelievable. He has sold 950,000 barrels to China, to a Chinese firm. And guess who a chief investor in that firm might be?
I'm going to guess, going way out on a limb, something to do with Hunter Biden.
That would be Hunter Biden, the firm he's heavily invested in.
That's an educated guess.
Yeah. Well, it's not hard to guess that. But, when Biden went in, the media loved to talk about he was as tough on China as Trump was.
Right.
He was really holding their feet to the fire. Well, I said from the very beginning, I said from day one, number one, he's owned by China.
Clearly.
Hunter Biden is owned by China. I said there are going to be very subtle things that start happening over time to benefit China. Well, one thing was the fact that he's never held their feet to the fire on the COVID relief.
That's right. That's right.
On the lab leak.
When it's clear it came from that lab.
Yeah.
And that seems evident.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. No doubt about it. But to sell strategic reserve oil to the Chinese, of all people.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's not so much the volume of oil, because like we just discussed, it really isn't that much in terms of our, but it represents a strategic reserve for for military circumstances. Really, to be releasing it even for domestic consumption is a little cavalier.
Yeah,
okay.
I agree.
But to sell it to China, our chief geopolitical adversary in the world, to me, that's impeachable, if not actually actionable as a charge for treason. I really do believe that.
To me, that would qualify as a treason.
Yeah, absolutely. What possibly could possess these people to think that is a productive move for the United States and its security? Yeah. Really, I mean, it's just another piece of prima facie evidence that we are in the hands of people who are trying to deconstruct and dismantle this country. It's that simple.
Absolutely.
The enemies of this country are in charge of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I say Joe Biden, and we direct this at Joe Biden, but Joe Biden is not in charge.
No.
Joe Biden can't even read the script from a teleprompter.
Without actually reading the voice cues, like repeat the line, where he actually did that the other day, where he actually said, end quote, repeat the line.
Yeah. He's going to have cue cards to tell him to go into a press conference, where to sit, when to sit, who to direct his question to. He's got cue cards for that.
They'd be better off with one of those fairly sophisticated Japanese automaton robots that they've got that are pretty lifelike. They could just put that up there and feed it the Ron Klain generated talking point.
There you go.
And I think get a better result than they're getting with,
Well, as we say, Biden is not the one in charge. His director of the National Economic Council, Brian Deese, said the other day, all of these things that the Biden administration is doing, and these high prices and the inflation that we're expected to tolerate.
Right. This was in response to a question about how long are the American people supposed to put up, and are they going to be expected to put up with these high levels of inflation and these high gas prices? And this guy's response was very revealing.
Oh, it was. He said, this is all about the future of the liberal world order. The liberal world order. Now, if you remember when Bush was in office, he talked about the New World Order.
Right.
He came right out and said, the New World Order. Well, now Biden's administration, because Biden is obviously not the one they want talking about
Yeah.
this, but his minions talk about the liberal world order.
Well, you may recall that when John McCain, the late John McCain, became unhinged over Donald Trump and his policies, it was very much exactly, he gave a speech, and it was very much exactly along those lines. Essentially, we established a quote-unquote liberal world order or a world order after World War II, and we cannot see that upset.
Right.
Okay. And that liberal world order is the thing that gave us, Bretton Woods and all the monetary policies, all the things that have ultimately been used in the furtherance of globalism. And Donald Trump's presidency, however well informed he was about exactly what was going on, it was a big threat to that. It was revealing to a lot. It was Donald Trump wasn't a cause, he was an effect. Everybody acts like, well, none of this would have happened if he hadn't got it. No, Donald Trump was an extremely imperfect vehicle for a lot of this stuff. I didn't even trust that he was going to govern, as any kind of conservative based on his historical stands on issues in New York, and we could digress on and discuss that ad nauseum. But to me, it was clear that he was not part of that global order thinking.
Right.
Whether it was naively from the standpoint of he just didn't see how these things benefited the United States or what, he wasn't necessarily a part of that and represented a huge, huge threat to those who wanted to perpetuate it. And, all knives are out, including from people like John McCain.
Yeah, absolutely. John McCain, Mitch McConnell's betrayed himself.
Right. So this guy, this Dees guy, is very much part of that that collection of thought that essentially is trying to preserve and perpetuate this global order.
Yep, absolutely.
But does not include in its makeup an understanding or an appreciation for constitutionally limited government or the liberties that we enjoy in this country.
Well, you can believe that all of the things going on, whether it's the Antifa crowd, the BLM, the teachers union, which the teachers union just voted overwhelmingly in convention to promote LGBT awareness and inclusion and all of those things that we know are destructive to children.
Highly. Well, they've been as much. I read an article last night by one of these sort of well-known drag queens, basically saying, our objective is to distort and corrupt children's understanding of normal sexual mores before they are formed. That's really what we want to do, because blah blah blah, and he had a bunch of stupid reasons for that. But they're very open about what it is they want to do.
Yeah, and they've got the teachers union behind them because a lot of the teachers are part of that whole movement. But all of those things are Marxism in action.
Right. That's
Marxism. Right. They're teaching. They're not teaching about Marxism in school. They're teaching Marxism.
That's right. Well, they're teaching Marxist thought and cultivating Marxist resentment.
Exactly. That's what Marxism is.
Right.
Marxism is about dividing the population into identifiable groups and then pitting those identifiable groups against each other.
And it's particularly about cultivating resentment among those who probably are their resentment is easily cultivated for a number of things that have nothing to do with society and its fundamental structures.
Absolutely.
I mean, nothing in the Constitution or the United States of America promises that a person is going to have a great and happy and trouble-free life. What it says is that you have the most opportunity to transcend your circumstances, whatever they may be. Okay? And that is a key distinction between our society and all others that have come before. But people who are born, who draw a bad card, and I know there's plenty of them, I'm more sympathetic I could not be, they are very, very susceptible to this kind of thinking.
Absolutely.
And you can look at most of them and tell. Just look at any lineup of the Antifa types that have been arrested, and you can just look at them right now and you can say, I understand the problem. I see exactly what's going on here.
There's common characteristics.
There's some very, very common
recognizable
characteristics that feed a certain psychology that is driven by resentment and hate and basic internal loathing.
Yeah, malcontent.
Yeah.
We got to take another little break because we've shot our schedule in the foot here.
Well,
But that's the way it goes sometimes when you get on a certain subject. So we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, you know what? I've had an epiphany.
Oh, good.
I'm convinced that there's climate change.
All right.
And we're going to talk about that when I come back.
Well,
or when we come back, rather.
There's some nasty weather outside. I agree with that.
Well, that storm for sure. It's because of climate
That's
change.
right.
For sure.
That's right.
Anyway, we're going to take a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about definitive proof of climate change. So you won't want to miss that. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we are back. And as I've said, I've had an epiphany.
I can't
about
wait.
Climate change.
Okay.
You know, and I know this is going to shock people, but, you know, the climate has changed since day one. I think we all know that. I think we all understand that. I don't think there's any dispute about that. You know, we have marine fossils in Utah. Well, here's a big article, and what's funny is at the end of the article they actually get in some of the woke nonsense.
Right, of course they do.
You know, this is one of those articles that's put up in Foxfire, suggested for you.
Okay, right.
And 99.99% of those are just leftist garbage.
Sure,
you know?
right.
But every now and then I look at one. You know,
Yep.
it was making salt from ancient underground oceans. Okay. Now, you know, they talk about sea level rise. They talk about all this stuff about you know, severe storms and all this nonsense. And you know where the salt deposit is? This is an underground salt deposit where an ocean used to be. It's in West Virginia. This is highly prized salt. This salt deposit goes back to colonial days when salt was very valuable.
Right.
You know, in those days, salt was very valuable. You couldn't run down to the food line and
get a whole thing of Morton, salt, iodized salt for 99 cents. That's right.
But salt seabeds in West Virginia.
Right. Well, where did the Bonneville salt flats come from?
Exactly. So, you know, there's change coming over millions of years.
Right. The climate is constantly in flux.
It's constantly in flux. But in our lifetime, in humankind's span,
right,
it's been fairly constant.
It's
been kind of an ideal environment for humankind.
Right, and until all this global warming and climate change nonsense was part of the discussion, you know, people pretty much discussed these various geologic ages with some common sense. You know, certain things we know are true. We know there was a little ice age. We know there's a glacier that's continuing to retreat, actually.
Yeah.
But that's retreating. That's an ice age that goes back several thousand years.
Exactly.
Okay, and you can see the scarring and the effects on the landscape of this ice as it's retreated.
Yes, you can.
And frankly, a warmer planet is probably a greener, more friendly planet to life.
It is.
Okay.
Well, if you go back to I believe it's called the Maunder Minimum.
The Maunder Minimum, that's right, in the medieval period.
In the medieval period.
That's right.
It was a period of growth and development.
That's right.
And prosperity.
That's right.
And, you know, it was a wonderful time for those people back in what they now call the Dark Ages.
That's right. Well, all this stuff is driven fundamentally by the input of solar energy into our ecosystem. We have a planet that's orbiting the sun. It's called the Earth. And that sun radiates a certain amount of power from its ongoing fusion reaction. And that amount of power is immense. And there's a tiny amount of that power and energy that's intercepted by the Earth. And that power can fluctuate a little bit over.
Absolutely.
And that has huge and dramatic consequences for things like ocean currents and air and flow. You couple that with tectonic shifting of continents. The climate has been in a perpetual state of flux since the planet was formed. Okay, human existence has been but a blip on that cosmological time frame. Okay, therefore our observations are based on our very limited A, lifespan, and B, our very limited data collection since we became self-aware enough and sophisticated enough to make these measurements. So making any predictions about climate change and claiming that something that constitutes literally less than 0.01% of the atmosphere. The atmosphere is 78% and change nitrogen, about 21% oxygen, and about maybe 3% argon, and maybe 0.03% everything else.
Right.
And about 0.01% carbon dioxide, and we're told that very small trace gas of carbon dioxide, which we exhale and plants take in. We have kind of a deal with the plant life. They give us the oxygen, they take our it's like a waste exchange where we can use your waste and you can use our waste. It's a really elegant system.
It really is.
That small amount of CO2 is not driving the climate in any way. Water vapor is a much more profound greenhouse gas
Yeah.
Okay? And these nitwits who have bamboozled people into thinking the end of the world is nigh in 10 or 12 years because of essentially what amounts to a trace gas, okay? Any of this data can be manipulated. It's
Yes,
just,
it can.
I mean, because it's very subject to fudge factors. It's all done by computer modeling. None of it reflects really hard data or accurately gathered hard data.
Right.
I really, as you can tell, I take umbrage at the whole, climate change nonsense because and it's based solely on just scaring people with these ridiculous claims that have no merit. And finally, I'll add, not a single one of their predictions of these people have been putting forth for the last 50 years, not one of them has come true. And we've talked about some of those predictions in the past. We need to do a show where we just go through the litany of predictions. By now, these are predictions that were made in the early 2000s. We're not even supposed to have snow anymore.
Right, that's right.
Well, trust me, there's plenty of snow still in the world.
Yes, there is, and snow sounds pretty good right
Yeah,
now.
well,
It was hot today.
It was very hot today. Well, what more evidence do you need about global warming?
Well, that's right. And it was funny because I was having a conversation with someone about that, and I said, because I was looking at some pictures from years ago, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't believe that I used to work outside in the hot sun, South Mississippi.
Right.
Hot and humid.
Right.
Daylight till dark, out in the hot sun.
That's right.
Working. I said, boy, I was tougher then than I am
well,
now.
Right.
It's
not the climate that's changed. You've changed.
Yeah, I've changed.
That's right. I mean, because my tolerance for a lot of this stuff has gone way down.
That's right. It's amazing what 40 years will take out of it.
Right.
But that's the thing. I hear so many people say that. Oh, well, I don't remember ever having snow like this or heat like this.
Right. And some of those things may be true. I mean, I remember actually, when I was in a military family, we moved around, but we were in Rocky Mount sporadically. I can remember in the late 60s, early, the City Lake would freeze over occasionally. We had frozen City Lake in Rocky Mount. Well, it doesn't do that now. That hasn't happened in a long time. But that doesn't mean there's this life-threatening climate. And and even if there were some anthropogenic, which is the word they use to mean human cause, even if there were some anthropogenic global warming, are we really prepared to say, okay, a 1 degree Celsius increase in global temperature over the next 50, 100 years is enough to completely blow up our world economies, and destroy our energy independence and our ability to live comfortable lives of cheap energy? It isn't. But these Marxists and these globalists are using this as a way, just like they use COVID, as a way to coerce us into doing things that we wouldn't otherwise do. Absolutely. They tried it with nuclear scare tactics. They tried to scare us all into submitting when the Soviet Union was a thing. Same kind of thing. If we don't sacrifice our liberty and our freedom, we're all going to burn up in a fireball of nuclear holocaust. Yeah, none of that was true. None of that came to pass.
I remember the duck and cover drills in the school.
Right.
Duck and cover.
Now, these people are all very transparent and shallow, and they're liars.
They are, and it's just like the media today. The media is constantly wrong.
Right.
The media is constantly wrong. We have people who say they've seen the evidence, but now they're saying, well, there is no evidence.
Right.
On one hand, wait a minute. If the people who told us for 4 years plus that they saw the evidence are now telling us that they have evidence of something, well then, I think you need to apply a little inverse logic there.
Right.
They told us there was evidence when there was none. Now they're telling us that there is no evidence. And it's like, well, yeah, there is evidence.
Right.
There is evidence. They're lying.
Well, they're taking advantage of the fact that people largely don't dig into these things very much.
Well, they don't.
And I'm not castigating people for not doing that. Yeah. People have their lives.
Yeah.
Okay. And frankly, the founders understood that. They wanted to create a system that would preserve people's liberty without necessarily relying on them to exercise the best judgment on policy.
Right.
So they created a system that greatly retards the influence of the masses on the direction of the country in such a way that ultimately it's not really supposed to be a democracy. And we talk about that a lot on this show, ad nauseum.
Absolutely.
But that is so fundamental. And I thought it was interesting, Biden's press secretary, what's her name? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, whatever it is.
Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, I know. I just say that. I call her Jean-Claude Van Damme sometimes too. Whatever. Okay. She was asked about the mob treatment of Supreme Court justices, specifically Justice Kavanaugh, in the restaurant where he got run off by this group, and you got Twitter organizing these flash mobs to go after these guys. And her response was, "Well, this is what a democracy is."
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to say that's correct.
That is absolutely
That's exactly correct. That's no different than when Antifa was marching through the street saying, "This is what democracy looks like." That was their chant. That's exactly what democracy is, and you will find that that is true in any of these mobocracy situations. Those are its chief characteristics. That's why we are explicitly not a democracy.
Right.
And that's why it pains me to no end when I see people who purport to be on our side blathering on about our democracy this and our democracy that. There are democratic elements, small d, to the way our government is structured, but we are fundamentally not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic which is designed to specifically limit those kinds of mob rule tactics and forces to direct government and direct policy.
Exactly.
Nauseating that so many people on our side don't understand that basic civics fact.
You know, there's an aspect of this that I was thinking about today because I saw an article about it, or something about it, and I looked at the comments. And the comments were, well, he's in public, he has no expectation of a right to privacy. The Supreme Court said, you know, there's no expectation of privacy, this, that, and the other. And I agree with that. That's true.
That's fine.
That's
sure.
true. That's true. But there's also a federal law that says if you intimidate a judge, and especially a justice of the Supreme Court, trying to change the outcome of something, that's a federal crime.
That's right.
So if they're out there protesting some topic and the judge happens to be in the restaurant, well, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
If you're targeting that justice, that's a federal crime.
That's right.
I'm sorry. You know, you don't have the right to get a flash mob together and say, well, Kavanaugh's going to be at such and such cafe at 4 o'clock, let's go down there.
Right.
That is illegal, people. But we don't have a Justice Department that cares anything about that.
Well, the thing is, you know, that side, they'd cry like stuck pigs in two seconds. Look, they can't, God, they go catatonic if you just misgender them. If somehow you don't, you know, they want to dress like a woman, even though they're still anatomically a male, and you refer to it as a he, they have a complete meltdown. So
they've been professors fired for that.
Right. They couldn't take 2 seconds of the kind of treatment they mete out.
Right. And what was that reporter's name? That somebody outed her on something and she was crying on TV?
Taylor Lorenz. That complete, pampered, overprivileged, white liberal nitwit female. Absolutely.
Crying on TV because someone outed her.
Yeah. She is emblematic of the biggest morons in our society who are actually have a stage. It's unbelievable they actually have any kind of platform whatsoever to talk about anything.
Yes, they do. Now, we got about 2 minutes, but I wanted to get this in. You know, the Highland Park shooter. The Highland Park shooting has precipitated all of these knee-jerk reaction gun laws.
As expected.
Trader Tom Tillis sold us out on that. You know, we protested. In fact, I ran across a video of that protest today online, so it's out there. And, you know, they made a point of talking about he closed his office so that he didn't have to listen to it.
That's right. Well, he's a coward.
He's a coward.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Illinois has some of the toughest gun laws in the nation. All right, they're talking about the red flag laws and all this stuff. Well, Illinois has red flag laws.
They
do. Here's the process for buying a gun in Illinois. The buyer must possess a valid FOID card, which is a firearm owner identification
card. They do that in some of these states. Massachusetts has the same thing. I happen to know that.
You got to apply for those.
Right.
You have to have someone vouch for you to get one of those.
Right.
The buyer must verify local firearm ordinance requirements, saying whether he can own them or not. So the burden's on the buyer. The buyer must display the FOID card to the FFL before handling a firearm. So you can't even go to the store and look at one if you don't have one. It's kind of like the pistol permits here. You know, most dealers won't let you look at a pistol if you don't have the permit.
Right.
The buyer has to complete a 4473, the ATF form, which is a standard form when you're buying a firearm. You have to fill it out. The FFL notifies the Illinois State Police Firearm Service Bureau to perform a background check in accordance with state and federal laws. The FFL receives an approval, yes or no, and the buyer must have a waiting period before he takes possession. For a long gun, it's 24 hours, and for a pistol, it's 72 hours. Upon taking possession of the firearm must be unloaded and enclosed in a case to transport. All right. Cook County also has an assault weapons ban that bans high-capacity magazines. Highland Park has an assault weapon ban that bans large-capacity magazines. So, what we're seeing, none of the laws that were passed in response to the Highland shooting will do anything.
Well, I'll give you an even better example, more topical and more dramatically demonstrating the point you're making. Shinzo Abe, former Prime Minister of Japan, was just shot, dead with a homemade gun in a country that has the most strict gun control laws, probably other than China, of anywhere in the world. I mean, the only thing a person can get in China is a shotgun or an air gun, an air rifle, and that's after jumping through numerous hoops, and everything being on. I mean, I would be a waste of time here to go into how restrictive it is. It's incredibly restrictive, and yet somebody made a gun and shot the former prime minister. These gun laws don't work. Now, I know Japan has a very low rate of gun crime, but they have a low rate of crime in general. All right, they're an ordered society, and trust me, Americans wouldn't last 5 minutes living the way they live in Japan. They have a 98% conviction rate. If you get caught up in their legal system, you're going to jail. There's no innocent until proven guilty. Now, I respect Japan. I really do. I have a high respect for that culture and their society. It's incredibly ordered. They were a formidable enemy in our past, and they're not to be trifled with, but they're completely different than we are.
Absolutely.
And the liberty that we enjoy is largely predicated on those 10 items in the Bill of Rights, and one of them is firearms ownership. And don't get fooled into thinking that it has to do with crime or any of those things. It doesn't. And if a person can be, if a high-profile person with security can be assassinated with a homebrewed gun, none of the stuff that people want to do to prevent these shootings is going to work.
That's right.
Especially when we've been cultivating mentally ill behaviors and cultivating such, really reckless policies toward the way we treat young people in this country for the last 50 years. That's the root of the problem.
Absolutely. And with that, we're out of time. We'll be back next Saturday for more America in Danger. Hope you have a great week. We'll see you then.